It is very nice to be here in Prague. I have not been to your beautiful city that much in the past, so it is very nice to be here on such a sun-shining day. Hopefully there is a message as to how the world may evolve as we go forward. I have to say, when Lanimar was inviting me to this event, the first thing I did was check the football calendar, because I am rather crazy about football, and I knew it was going to be the weekend of the FA Cup in England, so it's the next round. But at the time when I agreed, I did not know that Manchester United would be playing Liverpool. In some ways, therefore, you're lucky, because if we were, I would have wanted to have been in that game. But anyhow, so long as I can find somewhere to watch it on TV, I'm looking forward to enjoying the whole weekend here. Let me turn to this very interesting title, Strong China Limping Euro and Central Europe at the Crossroads. Let me say three things about this connected title. First of all, I assume most of what Vladimir would like me to concentrate on is the strong China part. But as those of you that follow the world really closely and markets may know that right now people are, in fact, in addition to being worried about Europe, worried about whether China is so strong still. And there is a big debate of whether China can achieve soft landing or hard landing. Within my remarks, talk about that. On the third part of this, of Central Europe at the Crossroads, even though I look at all the world, I would say that I have no real expertise, along with my fellow guests here, about Central Europe. But my guess would be, given how close you are to the economic fortunes of Germany, one of the most interesting things in recent weeks, despite the crisis in Europe, appears to be signs that Germany is strengthening in terms of its economy. And that may well be the most relevant part of it, I suspect, for you guys here and beyond, although Wolfgang, of course, will lead us as to, no doubt, all sorts of possible paths which maybe we get into discussing later. So let me turn to start showing you some pictures, and I'm going to jump around, so I apologise to the translators that have the difficult task of trying to follow my slides. And trying to go through some of them in about 20 minutes, let me make three overall comments, and I'm jumping to this page first to emphasise the most important. In my judgment, the four BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India and China, and four others, Mexico, Korea, Turkey and Indonesia, that you can see on the right-hand blue pie chart, those 8 countries are actually the countries which are driving the world economy. Each of them is at least 1% of global GDP or more, collectively over 20%, and linked to my philosophy of trying to understand the modern complex world, it is kind of ridiculous that we still call them emerging markets. And in my role, especially since I actually have moved into the asset management division the past year, we are trying to persuade people, not just investors but also human beings, to stop thinking about these countries as traditional emerging markets. If you accept that premise and look at the left-hand chart and put them into the world of what I would call growth markets, you will see that they are nearly double the GDP share of the rest of the emerging world, which probably still should be regarded as emerging markets. So, against that definition, let me go back to the first picture. And I am guessing that at the back of the room you cannot see these numbers. Hands up, you cannot, right? No, you can't. Oh, you can. So, you have a lot better eyesight than I do. So this is simply looking at the next year and 2013. GSAM, the asset management division of which I'm now chair, numbers are in yellow and the consensus are in white. And there are really three very quick points that I want to make. The first of all is, despite the fact we are forecasting a recession in the euro area, despite that, we expect the world economy to grow by 3.5%. For most of the past 30 years, the world economy has grown by about 3.2–3.3%. So even with the euro crisis, the true world, as opposed to a Western view of the world, is actually doing better than many people think. Secondly, the reason why that is the case is of course because of what I just showed you, the contribution of the 8 countries that I call growth markets, which even with slower growth, they are contributing another increase probably of more than 6%. The third thing I would say, and I will only have a little bit of time to show you some part of this, it is my growing suspicion that the US economy is actually improving more than the consensus thinks. And I just spent much of the previous week in the US, and I feel that's reasonably confident. But let me go to the bigger picture to try to explain the excitement about this changing world from my perspective, as well as some of the complexities. And here is a chart which shows you what we are forecasting or assuming in terms of the change in the dollar value of GDP this decade. And the tallest red bar, red for Manchester United, is about $15 trillion. And if you look closely enough, you will see that the $15 trillion increase in those great growth market 8 countries is more than double that of the US and the euro area put together. More than double. Second thing to point out is that China alone, China on its own, is going to contribute more in dollar terms to global GDP than the US and Europe put together. And let me emphasize, linked to what I said in my starting comments, this is assuming that China is going to slow down. This assumes that China will grow by 7.5% on average this decade. Even with that, its contribution to the world will be twice that of the US or Europe. And the final point to point out, in the context of the #1 fear in the markets again this week, Greece, you would need to have a magnifying glass to see the economic relevance of Greece on this chart. As I go all over the world, people ask me everywhere about Greece. Apologies to any of you that are from Greece, but when I'm asked, when they say, what do you think about Greece, my answer is, not much. Nice country, but it's only of any relevance for the world we are in if the European authorities mishandle the consequences of their debt restructuring. If they don't, then frankly, it isn't that important in a global context. To demonstrate that point, look at this chart. What it's essentially designed to show that in the next year alone, so 2012, the year we started, the increase in the 4 rich countries' GDP will be nearly as much as the size of Italy, about $2 trillion. China itself creates the economic equivalent of another Greece every 4 months. So you could wipe Greece completely off the map, and China will create another 3 economic equivalents this year. In terms of the big picture, again, of course, as this picture unfolds, it is exceptionally relevant beyond just simple GDP and narrow economics. And in terms of geopolitics and world governance, this changing pattern is becoming increasingly relevant. This is what the share of global GDP would look like by the end of this decade, based on what I just showed you. And let me say 3 also very quick things about this. First of all, as you can see, the share of the BRIC countries in global GDP will become bigger than the US. In fact, that will probably happen by 2015. Without something going disastrously wrong in China, that will happen in the next 3 years. Secondly, linked to that, the next time we have a change in the head of the IMF or the World Bank, beyond the most immediate change in the World Bank, but the next one in a few years, it is no longer going to be capable of being a nice little cozy deal between Washington, Brussels and Berlin. It is almost definitely going to get more complicated and probably be somebody from one of the growth market countries at the IMF. Thirdly, linked to this, and also linked to what's implied in the title, and ironically, in my judgment, because of the accelerated financial crisis, China seems to be accelerating the pace of Chinese renminbi reform, and in my judgment, by 2015, it is quite likely the renminbi will be part of the so-called special drawing rights of the SDR. It is also possible, despite no doubt considerable opposition from the likes of London, that it may include the Russian ruble also. And so the whole world economy and financial system and form of global governance is changing dramatically because of the world in which we are moving into. I thought I'd also show you this picture because it has one of the few things that I have got with direct relevance for the Central European countries. This is a complementary chart about how we define the difference between growth market economies and traditional emerging markets, and it projects into the future, looking idiotically into the future of 2050 as to how it could expand. And you can see where yourselves, Hungary, smaller, and Poland, to the left, closer to growth market status, sit relative to, in this simplistic way, relative to these other countries. Let me jump forward. Not only is it true that much of the growth in the world is being driven in what I call the growth economies, but actually they are also these days financially the most conservative and respectable. Or as I am fond of saying, the fiscal positions in the growth market economies would make the Swiss prouder. They are more Germanic than German. In fact, if you contrast this picture, where I'm showing both debt and deficits as a share of GDP, here is the picture for most of the so-called developed world, and here is the picture for the growth 8. In this incredible focus about moving to an even tougher stability pact, or so-called fiscal compact, actually, right now, there are only 2 countries in EU that satisfy the original criteria. Finland, and interestingly, your cousins in Slovakia. If European policymakers were forced to stick with what they originally agreed, EU would have 2 members. Even noisy Germany shouldn't be in it. But to demonstrate the degree of change going on in the world, if the 8 growth market economies were daft enough to want to geographically move to Europe, 6 of them would walk in tomorrow. That's how much the world is changing. And I see every day in my role more and more signs of world investors starting to shift their asset allocation, including in fixed income markets, against this background of this apparent strong fiscal position in the growth market world and the not so great fiscal position in the developed world. I won't say too much more about this now, because I know that Wolfgang will concentrate on this very complex topic, but 2 other comments of me on this. I do not really believe that the European crisis is a sovereign debt crisis. It is a crisis, in my judgment, about leadership, structure and governance. If it were a crisis about sovereign debt, then actually it should be worse in Japan, the US and the UK, because each of those regions or countries have much worse fiscal problems than the average of the euro area. So either markets are mad and just don't realise that, or it's not actually really a problem. The problem is there are too many countries that joined the EU in the first place, and there are too many people in the EU that don't think of the interests of all of them, in my opinion. No doubt we'll discuss that more later. Let me jump forward further in view of the time. Many people, when they hear me talk about the brick or growth market story, especially in the West, always think that these countries are growing at the expense of the West. That might have been true many years ago. But one of the many reasons why I believe China is moving more and more towards what should be regarded as a soft landing, there are growing signs that they are adjusting their economies too. Of all the pictures I'm showing you this afternoon, this is probably the most important. It's a picture of, let me call it, global shopping. The red line is retail sales around the world adjusted for inflation. The blue line is the same but just for the growth market economies, and the yellow line is for the so-called advanced world. Most people from my generation are used to growing up in a world where all that matters is the US consumer. It has not been true for many years, and it is increasingly no longer the case. even though most people in the West still think that that is the case. I give you a very interesting anecdote just from arriving here in Prague this morning. We were being shown around a hotel 200 yards walk away from here where I'm staying, and the concierge told me that there are 3 paintings in that hotel. Have to be careful. They probably might need a little bit more security after what I'm about to just say. That Chinese wealthy people are trying to buy 3 of them for more than $1 million. For famous Czech painters, I believe. That is a picture all over the world. Not sure how many of you ever go to London, but next time you do, if you have 15 minutes free to walk down Bond Street, the luxury shopping street, if it were a nice sunny day like this, when you get to Louis Vuitton, you would not be able to get past, because it would be full of Chinese and Indian and other wealthy tourists from these countries buying luxury goods. And that is how the world is changing. So the world is doing better in some areas than many people think. Right at the core of the Euro problem or challenge is this picture, which in my judgment is one of the most interesting things that are going on. This is a picture of German exports, and why I said the third thing that I said in my opening comments. The red line, which looks like, in sporting terms, Manchester United's rise to fame in the past 25 years, is German exports to China. And when we get the final data for 2011, it is going to show that Germany is already exporting more to the 4 BRIC countries than it is doing to France. And within another 12 months, it may be exporting as much just to China as it does to France. And that is how the world is evolving. It also, by the way, means that even if EMU can survive its current problems, as we go through time, they actually get bigger. Because the economic rationale that was there in the first place, that they all did so much trade with each other, is going to start increasingly fading away. It is not just Germany that's exporting to the BRICS. Here is a picture for the United States. Not the same BRICS, and not to the same importance, because unfortunately for the US, exports are a very small share of overall GDP. But as you can see, export growth from the US to Brazil and Mexico, very strong. Even the UK is sure, even the UK, which struggles to export anything other than disgruntled footballers, is showing some signs of it. So, there is a flavour of how the world is changing. To add to my belief that this year the world is going to do better than people think, as I said also at the start, I'll just show you 2 more pictures and I'm going to stop. There is also growing signs that the US economy may be recovering from its deep challenges since 2008. And I'll show you 2 of many pictures. This is a picture of weekly job claims. A very reliable indicator that's been around for a long, long time. The line going down is good, and the line going up is bad. And as you can see, it's been going down in an increasingly accelerating manner. And this is a lead indicator of US unemployment. It looks and suggests that President Obama might be, if not clever, certainly lucky. I would add, as an aside, his friends in the Republican Party appear to be making it rather easier for him. Beyond that, and the bigger picture, second chart I thought I chose to show you is this very interesting one. Because it may well be that we are very close to a turn in the US housing market also. The red line shows you the relationship of US house prices to personal income. And in many ways, the yellow line is the mortgage rate. In many ways, that red line describes everything about the internal US economy for the past 15 years. Very stable in the 1990s, rose like crazy into this bubble in the naughty noughties, and then of course collapsed after 2007. US house prices have fallen so much. That's why it's been so painful, but they have fallen so much that affordability is now back to where it was at the start of the 1990s. And so looking forward, it is virtually impossible for this to be anything like the challenge it's been in the past. So I'm going to leave you with this chart, which comes to do with markets from our recommended approach to investing in this complex world. About 15 months ago, I moved into a job of being the chairman of our asset management division. And influenced by my life as being, let's call it Mr. Brick, I believed that so-called market cap benchmarking, which is what you see in the middle column here, the conventional way that asset managers and investors use a benchmark, is an outdated approach because it doesn't adequately capture the changing world. And I thought we should probably have instead GDP-weighted benchmarking. And that's what the first column shows you. I realized, without being too complicated, I realized that in fact that was a little bit naive, because it would probably overcompensate for the importance of growth market economies, because it would not take account of companies, for example, like BMW or Nestle, which located in terms of headquarters in a developed country, see most of their revenue growth from the growth markets. So the third column is what we call the GSAM approach. Takes account of every company's revenue growth from all over the world, irrelevant of the country in which they are legally domiciled. And if you do this, and put it all in an optimization process, very interestingly, contrary to what most people think, in a global portfolio, it suggests you get less risk by having more exposure to the growth market economies. The nirvana which investors should be looking for. So let me finish my comments there. I look forward to hearing those of my other colleagues on this panel. And thank you very much for your time.